throw a thing and blow it up? I know there's tons of them.
Good. Okay, we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. The board wants to provide ample opportunity for public comment on matters that come before us. Your input is important. If you wish to address an item already on the agenda, we ask that you do so when that item comes up for discussion. If you have a comment on a matter not on the agenda, this is the time during our meeting for such comments. The board would like to remind everyone in attendance that to avoid violations of individual rights of privacy, a member of the public wishing to address the board during this time will not be allowed to make comments about any student, staff member, or member of the general public during this time. Does anyone wish to speak at this time? Very good. Recognition of individuals, delegations, correspondence.
Initial reopening plan. I don't know if anybody else has anything to add, but I guess what I would say is I think things went very well as far as our reopening plan went. I think we put a lot of undue stress upon ourselves with what to do in preparation for start of school. It just went really well. We were concerned about the mask policy. We had a couple kids first morning tried to walk in like they own the place. That didn't last very long. But the kids have been absolutely fantastic. A few reminders here and there, but if they don't say anything back, they just do it. So I think that's been going very well. Teachers are doing a very good job with that. They're also taking mask breaks every now and then, taking kids outside, an opportunity to spread out, take their masks off. Plenty of distance and teaching outside while the weather's nice. So they have a few breaks in there. But the only thing we're kind of doing that we've heard a little bit about is parents saying, well, we're not allowing them in school. We're not allowing people to roam the school freely, just walk through the door and go about. But we are asking that they try to make arrangements with the teacher or principal to come up and make arrangements. We'll make a way to do it. Sit down and hopefully after hours, 4 hours, or if we can do it during the day, at least we'll do it. So I don't know if you guys have anything to add. It's gone well.
Done really well, honestly. Things that we were worried about, just didn't need to worry about. It's been awesome. The staff has been awesome. Everybody just, I think everybody wants to be here, and they're not going down to do what they have to do so that the door open. And they're very responsive. Kids came in this morning. They're asking us right away. I'm watching those kids get their hands sanitized in and out, and I think they're being very good. And so it's awesome. So they're going really well.
I saw your request for picnic picnic tables, did you get
Yes,
enough
so I
for?
got 3 total, I think, which is plenty. We just wanted to add a few more down the side, and the kids are actually using them. We used it for a student council meeting the other day out on the sign, just something to get the kids outside, encourage them to go out.
So you have enough?
Yeah, I think we're good, yeah.
Mr. Wilkerson, Ms. Everett, I guess I was gonna ask about this is probably the most apropos place, but are we gonna have to address, modifying the spectator portion?
So I
Of
have
our
that, I have
quote,
that
unquote,
on my report.
Okay.
So, I mean, but we can talk about it on that one.
No, that's fine.
Sorry, we'll use it later.
It's spectators for events, are kind of fall under a couple different areas, so I don't know if there's a perfect place. If you've got it on your things to talk about for your principal's report, then great. I
Okay.
guess we can go ahead and
Sounds good.
wait until then. Thank you.
Yep.
Any more reopening questions? Building project.
Elementary building project moving forward. I think was it last week before last, we had one of our in-person final meeting with Danny with our core group. Danny also came in during our PIR days, and then every grade level, including administration, kids and staff. So things are moving along quickly in a very positive way. I guess I don't have a lot more. I think a lot of people have been involved in a lot of the processes along the way. Right now, it's exciting for everybody.
I think Brad is supposed to be here to kind of go over some of that.
So what is it?
Yeah, I was looking at texting to Jason. I don't know if he's held up in traffic or something, but I thought he was supposed to be here as well.
I heard there's road construction down around Townsend.
Yeah, you would think he would know that.
Reports.
So maybe we can circle back. to
Yeah,
that
we'll
when he
fit him
shows
in
up.
whenever.
Yeah.
When is the next core meeting?
I think that was depending on tonight, how the night went.
Okay, I thought we had one.
I mean, there's a schedule that's out, but, obviously that's depending on what you guys take tonight as well.
23rd is the next
Yeah, that's
scheduled
what I
meeting.
got too.
Okay, we'll wait for that. Any other questions, comments on the building project? Okay, we'll move into the consent action items, minutes and warrants.
Mr. Chairman, I would move that we approve the consent action items as presented.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent action items as presented. Any discussion? Discussion, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion passes. Action items. Grant superintendent authority to approve contracts for architectural and general contractor.
All right, Mr. Swaddle from Hoping has suggested the board give the superintendent the authority to approve the contracts as the procurement officer. This is my official title. Giving superintendent this authority allows contracts to be signed without projecting the of the board. Of course, those contracts are based on the recommendation of Mr. Swaddle.
Along with managing day-to-day budget, COs, things that happen every day that we have to access the site, how we're interacting on the site. We have continual, we need somebody that's in charge, has the ability to act on those. Yeah. That's strictly for them to be able to keep this project moving at all times. Informational wise, I think I've talked to you, have to get any of the information. I know that legal counsel will cover all legal components of the contract. I'll cover my components of the contract for any one of you. But you still need somebody to be able to act on items. Same thing with as we're running the project as well. And the caveat to that, you guys have already approved the budget, right? You know that, right? The budget's been approved now. You've already have exactly what it's supposed to be designed to. You guys will be approving
Shane, my quick question, do you kind of have kind of like an established flow process? Or maybe kind of give us an example of how that might actually work, from identification of the issue, how that's determined, recorded, whatever, presenting that to the
So we
hearing
work with the
officer.
project managers on site. Things will come up, whether we're at a project meeting or at any given moment, they run into an issue or an issue we're gonna have to deal with. We look at it, we put out a request proposal, or at the moment, if, for example, if we're digging, we hit something, we don't need to keep on digging, we know we're gonna have to deal with it, we're tracking time and materials, get load tickets, we stay on top of that. That change order is gonna happen. At that point, I would be talking to Eric and say, hey, this is what happened. We hit this is how we're gonna track it, or here's the CO, we get a RFP goes out, we get the proposal back, I review the proposal, make sure the costs are in line with, commensurate with the work, come back, go to Eric, hey, here's the change orders we have this week or this month, or daily, saying, okay, here's the change order log. And the change orders don't always just go one direction. There's gonna be things that we're gonna find savings on that will come back, because we'll find efficiencies. And that budget that you've already approved that has a contingency in it, which you'll see, you'll approve the final GMP contingency. That'll just be a balanced game that you're going across. Yep, we had this many change orders, or we had this many negative change orders, deductive change orders, and that just keeps going along. Anything outside of that obviously has to come back to the board, because we've approved that budget.
And it's based on each phase, correct?
Well, no, it's based on the GMP, the guaranteed maximum price. The GMP is gonna be set, it's gonna be set with project contingency in it. You guys are gonna approve that. That contingency is what's picking up change orders, and also deductive changers just raise the contingency up. And then if anything would go outside of that, it would come back, has to come back to the board, obviously, because that's what you approved. Any changes in scope has to come back to we decide you want to put a wing on the school, another wing on the school, that has to come back to the board. Anything that would change the parameters of what you approved at construction CDs, that has to come back to the board if it's a change in that perspective.
You will see though budgets periodically throughout, they won't be officially up to sign or anything like that, but you will see budgets at the schematic design phase, which are already in, and we're moving into design development right now. So at 50% design development, which we're about to go into in the next week or two, we'll put together a price based on that. That we present here, this check to make sure we're projecting on that budget that Shane's talking about for the GMP that you guys have already set for the final budget. And then we'll also, when they have CDs too.
I'm gonna step in for just a sec. I asked, Eric to include this timeline, and if you look through those timeline, you will see those things that he just mentioned, the 50% design development, the 100% design development. And those dates, I think, have potential to change, but I did ask Eric to include that just so everybody could see kind of where in the process. I think it was when I talked to Sean, he asked a question about, how
I
the
just didn't know if we
flow of
needed-
things was gonna
If
go.
we needed to look at it, it was easier to look at it as kind of compartmentalized through each of the phases, or to look at it from the GMP and kind of,
We're running budget alignments continually, and we've already had our initial, it's not at the schematic stage yet, we had the preliminary budget alignment, and with my estimates, DAC's estimates, and the AME kind of weighs in as well, our budget alignments are tracking with what we have designed so far. As that changes, we make sure that we're correcting the designs that include staying within that budget perspective without changing the parameters of what you guys had asked for, and that would come down to things that, material selections, constructability things that would have nothing for you guys to even really look at. I mean, other than we already know that, hey, we're doing this brick here, and we're doing this metal panel here. You guys have already looked at those drawings and schematics.
yeah.
If we find a different material that does exactly the same thing and looks like that, there's no reason to bring that back back to, but it changes our, that's a budget line piece. So there'll be multiple pieces that we do that, because when we get to the final, we're gonna take it out to bid. It actually goes out for all the subcategories, all the sub scopes of work will go out for an official bid, mechanical, electrical. What we're trying to do is design this to where we know that we're gonna hit that budget when we take it out to bid, so we don't have to stop, go back and redesign the project and cut half a wing off. We wanna make sure that we're aligning our budget with our design and what you guys are choosing to put in the project. And there's gonna be components that, we're already looking at. There was a lot of casework in this project. It's fitting in the budget right now. It doesn't look, we haven't had to make any cuts to anything yet. But there could be a point in time that there is gonna be a point where we say, we're starting to run out of budget to meet exactly what you wanted. You're gonna have to make some hard decisions here, where you want to scale back. We're not at that point because the budget alignment was in less than 0.5%. So far.
But another example, one of the things we're looking at, wood pricing. I don't know if you guys have heard, but wood pricing in the last 60 days have actually gone,
Experienced it firsthand.
down up almost 3-4 fold. So we're looking at going from a wood sheeting to actually a different product. It's called Oxford Red, but it's a full product. So we're looking at those, and we're trying to time the market right, and we're seeing the issues that we have, and we're trying to stay back.
Yeah, and that's what you hired us. to
Right,
do, is it's-
yeah. No, and my question about flow and how change orders and those recommendations and things like that flow back to the procurement officer is just so that we can avoid at least in my mind, avoid the potential for any micromanagement, but also look at trends, which I think trends are something that potentially should involve board input.
Yeah, so you'll have access, this will be under a software management program. Procore is what we normally use at DAC. Yep, imagine this weekend, yep, but this time. You can come and look at pay applications, current RFIs that are out, request proposals that are out. You'll be able to see the pay applications on it. You'll be able to see anything you want to see at any given moment in time. You'll be granted, you won't be granted admin to change anything. You'll be able to come in and look at anything you want to see.
Yeah,
At any given
great.
moment.
I appreciate that. Thank you for that level of detail.
And of course, we'll come give you updates anytime, board if you want updates, and then say, yeah, here's where we are, but obviously you can look at it on Procore whenever you want.
Just to clarify, right now, we've been talking about the second action item here, to approve the budget amendments, which is part of our agreement with you, just to designate someone to do that. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, we're talking about action item number 2 here, we're not number 1. Is that correct?
I guess I don't know what you're asking.
It sounds to me like we're talking about number 2. The action item number 2, it has to do with during the ongoing project. Action item number 1 has to do with approving our initial contracts. If I understand it right.
Approve the contracts as well. That you can see the contracts, we'll go through the contracts with you. They could be brought up as a board item if you'd like. My point being is that we have to put somebody in charge to sign the contracts.
I understand that.
Okay, so let's focus on the first one then. Okay. So any more questions, or is there motion on the first action item?
Well, what Mr. Swandall was just describing has more to do with the second one than the first one.
Okay.
Based
So
on
let's
my
talk
answers,
about the first
So
one. Do you
let's-
have an agenda?
Yeah, I do,
Okay.
but I was actually answering Todd's question.
Oh, okay, okay. Great. Okay, so let's talk about this first one here. And then to my understanding, that is our initial contract with A&E and with Dick Anderson, is that correct?
It wouldn't be Dick Anderson for quite a while. I would say usually a couple months down the road, it'd probably be Dick Anderson. 133 into place, because we have a proposal for pre-construction services. It was already part of their submission.
Right.
That will need to take place through CDs, and then the contract would actually be executed at that point. Once we've established that they made it to pre-construction, which would be through CDs, that's when that contract would be executed. But A&E's design contract is, we're in the process of working on that right now with your legal counsel.
Okay. I guess my concerns about that, just on number one, I'm fine with number two, and we had agreed to that on the initial contract. On this first one, I mean, those form the basis of this entire project.
It does.
And I think it's important for the board to be able to review those before we give anybody authority to sign them, or but once you give someone authority to sign it, you basically approved it. We haven't even had a chance to review any of it yet. That's my big concern with it.
I understand your concern with that, and I don't have a problem with how if you'd like to see it different. I would say, reach out to your legal counsel, ask her how she would suggest you do it. I just know that it's usually, there's not gonna be many changes to that contract.
Right.
There's not a lot of, it's a contract that she's putting in all the legally, it's a very highly amended contract. She goes through, she has all of her legal pieces for your protection. I have all of our due diligence pieces that are put into that, making sure that we're getting all of our additional services clearly outlined, costs clearly outlined. And then after that, yeah, you can review this. It has nothing to do with you guys not reviewing it. Be happy to send it to, I think you should, everybody should be able to read through it. Point being was, we get the contract approved, we can put it on an agenda item. Let's get somebody to sign it so we can move forward with it. If you want to ask however you guys interact with her, she'll walk you through all the contract pieces or any questions you have.
I think what we've done in the past is she's basically, we've gotten a copy of the contract with her edits and her recommendations for it.
Yeah.
And I'm really not interested, and we talked about this on the phone, I'm not really interested in the legal aspects of it, because a lot of that's just boilerplate. I mean, those contracts are pretty much all the same.
Not this one.
Not this
even
one?
close.
Okay.
Not even close, yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
we
I'd say
need, we
there's
need to
probably
see, we need to
70%.
see her review and edits and recommendations. And, and I would have to trust, and if anyone from the public, anyone has any questions about that, I think she would be the person to answer them. Unless, you
Yeah,
feel.
I could answer anything on the due diligence side. That probably weighs more on my expertise.
Mhm.
The legal side would obviously weigh in on hers.
Right.
And the due diligence for additional services, what those additional services accompany with those additional services, what the deliverables are, what my expectations of when they're gonna deliver, how they're gonna deliver it. That would be more of my expertise. That's
Okay.
not something that she deals with, that's what I deal with.
Okay. And I think for me, as a board member, we have you and our legal counsel to review that. And I think it's our responsibility to verify that, we're getting the project that, what we told our taxpayers they were getting.
Yeah, and that comes in two forms. One, the contract, but it also comes in what you guys are gonna approve for your final design. That's-
Correct.
And what the budget is.
Yeah.
So you've done your budget, we already know what that is, that you've approved for dollar-wise.
Uh-huh.
You're gonna be approving the design and what's totally encompassed in all the design and programming pieces. You're gonna be approving what that is, and you're gonna approve the final GMP with your GCCM. Those are the three things that you're gonna be approving. The contracts tie those pieces together.
Right.
So you are approving all those components that are contractually tied. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Is there an ETA on the contracts?
I would guess it would be a couple of weeks, usually gets through our end of it in a week or so, and I'm usually conversing back and forth whether finalizing those get my final pass and I can send it out. And I think it would be pretty easy to do, just send out, everybody can look at it, you can ask questions, we can answer them, and then get it approved. The way I would suggest normally how it goes, to be honest.
You know, we talked about it on the phone a little bit too. How would you feel about, or would it even be necessary to present this at a committee meeting? The contract itself.
I would say you guys could take it and look at it and ask any questions you would want, but accomplish the same thing as having a committee. Or
Okay.
if you'd like it, I mean, I'll do whatever you guys want from that perspective. But I would recommend you guys can take a look at it, and I'm sure you guys talk with Dia fairly often and have an open line of communications if you have those type of questions. You've seen that I'm very accessible, and I make myself accessible to any one of you. That if you have questions for me, I can explain how I look at those components. So I think that would be just as easy to do, and then when it's fully formulated and you guys are comfortable with it, just put it on an agenda, and then Eric can sign it, and good to go. That make, that, same.
Oh, yeah, that's, I'm fine with that.
So I guess, should we, Mr. Chairman, I would maybe go ahead and move that we actually table the first action item until the October board meeting, which time we will have those contracts reviewed. You're able to go ahead and notice up whatever kind of meeting it is that we need to, and then we can have some direction for, you know, modifying the action item, even if it's necessary at the October meeting. I assume that isn't really gonna ball anything up
I wouldn't.
as far as.
I wouldn't think there would.
Continuity
It's
of-
gonna take a couple of weeks to get through Bia and through myself, and finalize. It'll go back and forth with Danny a couple times, I'm sure. So as long as, and if we need to have a special board meeting, I guess we can always call that, and if it's not gonna hinder, I know that A&E is fine working under this format. They've always been.
Well, yeah, and I don't think it's that. I think it's, I don't want to, I'll speak my own concern. Without, you know, granting somebody authority to approve a contract without knowing what the body of the contract looks like. That there is some unease there. So, it's only from, you know, how those things are laid out in the contract itself, so.
Sure. And I don't think it matters to us. I mean, the one thing that I don't want to do is hold it up. The other thing is it's really tough to go through a complete contract at a board meeting. That's a terrible place to try to get through. But the contract, I think everybody's dealt with those. These are very long contracts. There's a lot of components to it. That's where it's always better to have, if there's questions, you can just bring them up. I can answer them. Dia can answer her side of them. You guys are comfortable with it. Here it is. Eric can sign. We can move forward. Or however, you know, 1 and 2, usually the same people. So, and the board chair can be on there as well. I see that one.
So I understand, Kevin, that is what you would prefer to see, is to wait on
Yeah, I'd
that
rather-
action item
Yeah.
before.
Yeah, I think, yeah, definitely. Until we have a review and see Tova's comments. Yeah, and we do, you know, do what we need to do. Our responsibility to the district, and then I would be fine.
I would throw out that they're really not even comments. They're actually wholesale changes that she has made over the years and that I have made over the years. They're not. So when the contract comes to you, it won't be, I think you should say this, I think you should say this. It's going to come to you with, here's what B has put in, here's what I've put in, and you'll be able to read through that. Because we we actually pull articles out and put in new articles that specifically tie to what we expect. So it's not even a comment piece, I think 60% of the contracts are revised.
Right. Now, do you, when you see those comments, are you gonna, if you have any disagreement with Culliva, do you work that out with her then? And then, we'll see the results of whatever you've agreed to?
Yeah, and the nice thing is, this will be probably my 100th contract with her. So,
Okay.
She already knows what I expect in the contracts.
Okay.
I already know what she's put in the contracts. So,
Right. Okay.
It's very seamless. And if there's things that we've run into, the times that the contracts have changed is when something has come up on a previous project that didn't work out the way we wanted it. We've made those changes in the next contract to ensure that that doesn't happen. And that's been iterations over the last 7 or 8 years.
So in reality, we should probably just plan a special board meeting if people want.
Well, if we don't have them for 2 weeks, we're gonna be 2 weeks away from the next one anyway.
Right,
whatever
but
you
he's
guys
saying
wanna do.
if we want to diligently go through it, that doing it in a full-blown board meeting is probably
Right,
not the time and the place to do
right.
it.
But he was talking about just emailing it out. We'll go through it on our own. If we have any
Yeah,
questions with it, we can call Shane.
And you'll be
And then
comfortable
we
with
can come
that.
into a meeting and have our questions answered at that time.
And
before
you'll
we-
be comfortable with that.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Okay, so there is a motion to table action item number 1. Is there a second?
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded to table grant superintendent authority to approve contracts for architectural and general contractor until the October regular scheduled board meeting. Any discussion? Discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes. Action item number 2, grant superintendent the authority to approve budget and amendments and change orders as needed. So I think we began to touch on this.
Yeah, and I think that, that's really a necessary process to, in order to keep the project moving. And that's, actually that'll become important when we start breaking ground. That's when that'll start happening,
it's actually
or the day before.
It's kind of happening right now because obviously we had to get the geotechnical engineer on.
Right.
We're already finding that we need to get a couple of things done to the manholes on the sewer, storm sewer here. We need to get those cleaned out, so I'm gonna have to get some approval because we're trying to get that done right now so we can keep design moving forward.
Okay.
Also, there's some survey work on Second that I know that we're gonna need some additional survey work because of the traffic study that I'm glad we don't have to pay for another traffic study, by the way, so that was nice that you found that. But we have some additional survey work that we need to get done, so we're gonna have to approve that. I also have the asbestos abatement, the hygienists, I wanna get them on, I wanna make sure that we're already identifying everything in where we're gonna be demoing, that'll have
Sure.
to be tested.
I think that, superintendent can sign contracts up to $80,000. Is that correct? Anyway, by state law?
That's only if you guys give them approval to do that. So not usually, you have to give the authority for him to what amount of money he spends. Some districts say up to 80,000 you can, some districts.
There's a state statute.
There's state statutes, 80,000 for school, 75 for.
And that's
Others.
for, he doesn't need board
That's-
approval to do
That's for
those.
not taking it out and advertising publicly.
Oh, okay.
That's for advertisements, public advertisements. That is anything under 80,000. You're supposed to have minimums, if reasonably available, select three competitive numbers. 80,000 is that threshold.
So these are all under 25 then, so you can sole source? Is that correct?
Yeah, it's actually under 50 now, but they changed that in 17. But yes, they are, but
Not
we're
for us.
spending money.
Maybe for you, not for
Yeah, not
us.
for you. No, actually, I think they did on the state side.
We're
too.
still under 25.
So with all these, though, you're approving work, right? It's work that he's doing.
Right,
Yeah, and it's
Yeah.
gonna be continual like that. We're
Okay.
gonna-
Yeah.
We need to get Pioneer, we have additional holes that we need to start punching now immediately and get their load bearing capacities done. So it's somewhat already acting in that capacity.
Yeah.
That needs to continue.
Okay.
Is there a motion?
I'll move to approve, authority to approve budget amendments and contract orders as needed, to grant the superintendent the authority to.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded to grant the superintendent the authority to approve budget amendments and change orders as needed for the elementary building project. Any further discussion? Discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion passes. Okay, before we go on, Mr. Braddoll, did you have something to add?
Nope, well, I just, the elementary building project, line item number 2 up there. For us, I hope we all have got the SD book, the schematic design booklet, and we've all reviewed that. And my point was really to present or ask any questions you have, or answer any questions you have on the design. Sorry, did I take all what you've already talked about?
No.
I haven't gotten it, so I don't know.
You haven't got the book?
I don't think so.
You have books?
I don't, were you at the last meeting? I didn't,
At the project
And I can
meeting.
get my
Yeah, you were.
No, I was not there.
right afterwards, I'll get you a book.
And I would appreciate a second copy as well. I gave mine to a taxpayer who wanted to take a peek at it.
We
So
can get you digital versions.
that would be wonderful.
That way you can
That would be great. Might be a little,
share it that way.
file might be a little bit.
I can put it up on the screen if you guys like, but I don't know how far we're going to go.
Whatever you want to do, I guess so.
Well, I think everybody
It's a lot more interesting.
was,
The community meeting.
yeah, the community meeting, you presented it.
Yep.
And I think everybody was,
Really soft.
Kevin wasn't here for that either. Were you? You weren't here for the community meeting, okay. But you were, yeah, so you saw, okay.
Our budget alignment was based on that design. And like I said, our budget alignment's running pretty good right now. We haven't had to make any major,
Which is always a win for us, because you just laugh, because it's usually the other way. So I feel really good about where that went.
and as these are continually developed, that gets updated constantly as we run into components that are starting to go out of our budget controls. But we're already looking at alternatives. That's what this whole process is about, is making sure that we're finding the best.
The other part of the process is during the bidding piece, we give any subcontractor or vendor the opportunity to submit substitution requests, equal or better value of what we're showing in the model, and we then evaluate those to make sure that they're not in there.
Just going back to what I said about, that's how that works. They're able to put in a different material selection that's still accomplishing exactly what you guys saw and approved, but at a lesser expense. Without sacrificing quality, that's not, we don't, well, go down that. That's the life cycle just as well as the original.
Can I ask you just to touch on the teacher meetings and how those went? Obviously.
Yes, yeah, and I wasn't actually here, but my team was, and they were very appreciative. First of all, I think that was the overriding thing I heard from all of them, was that every teacher, I mean, it's pretty interesting when you go to the teachers, there's always a few that you get some different feedback from, but overwhelmingly, they were just so appreciative of getting something new and excited. And we've developed a process which is very, I think is a very strong process in how we work with those teachers, going through every wall. So we bring in drawings of their classrooms and their breakout spaces outside the classrooms. And I mean, we even go into like the gymnasium, where we are in the common spaces in some of those spaces, but we look at the walls and we talk about where whiteboards or projectors might be, where their tack strips would be, where for pinning up stuff on the walls, where their casework or furniture would be, or what kind of furniture they would like to use. So they're talking about grouping in small tables, larger tables, and this is a little bit ahead in some of the furniture, but it helps us start to think about the layout of the spaces, what's happening in there. And we just talk through all that spaces and their storage needs with all of that, and then outlets, where they need outlets. And that's always a sticky conversation because they all want 30 outlets. We can't afford 30 outlets, but we know that, and so we kind of just start bringing them into reality. Overall, it went really well, and our team came back and they were just real excited. Like they thought it went really well. Got a lot of information. It's a great day. When we do those, our team spends really the day here in a space like this or another space, and they kind of come to them and rotate. We get to kind of see the school and activity at the same time, which is always good.
And you will still do one of those with the students too at some point, hopefully?
We can.
if
Yeah, this
things-
is a little bit interesting because of the timing
Right.
of COVID, is we do like to sit down, and so we've talked about that from a relationship of, when we talk a lot about like wayfinding and graphics in the school, and maybe we utilize the students that start to tell a story about the new school and with some graphics or something. So we're still trying to sort through what the best method is for that. But when we do that, we bring the kids into the gym and we roll out a big large piece of butcher paper and we get their ideas, and it's a really good day, and then they go home to their parents and tell them how to be part of the design. It's just a really good process. And then as we get further into the details, we start meeting with your IT director, your janitorial staff, we get into some of that more nitty-gritty stuff as well.
Thank you.
And then I don't know if you guys have seen the phasing plan that Dick Anderson has done. I think it's a really good thought I've been put into that as far as, how far they want to take construction. Maybe I'm jumping ahead.
That would be the next presentation.
Sorry.
Well, we worked
It's a
through.
teaser.
Yeah.
We worked through a couple of the issues that we were having with the corner classroom conflicts with the building, but we made that solution. We're gonna design the building to where we don't have to have stairwells that built at the same time. So we've accommodated that we won't be touching the elementary. One place we are still struggling, obviously, we're gonna have to at some point tie into the middle school. That will be an issue. We're gonna affect 5 classrooms. Amy's done a good job of readying some potential classroom, like the new connector piece. If we get that built, that's big enough that we can split that into 2. We know that there's been, that was part of some of the discussions on how we're going to accomplish that. We're not there yet, but obviously we need to pick up, there's 5 classrooms, if I'm not mistaken, what we talked about. We got to pick up where we're going to be cutting the building off and tying into it. So at some point that's going to happen. But hopefully we've got the team working on it, be working with the school to make sure that that works for you guys on how we approach it.
So, Brad, our next core meeting, I think it was the 23rd. Are we sticking with that, or is there any change?
Excuse me, what time is that?
We have 3:30 to 5 on my calendar.
Yeah, that's what they said.
Yeah. What I got, we'll let it work.
Any other questions for any of those 3 individuals before we move on?
Not by me.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming. I think so. Student attendance agreements.
We have no new student attendance agreements.
Certified MOA.
All right, I sat down with Vanessa and Kevin to review the draft certified MOA created by MTSBA and MFPE. After receiving some suggestions concerning language from Alva Law, they made some proposed edits to the document, presented those edits to the union president and vice president for their comment. They agreed to the language as presented on the negotiation. So I would recommend to approve the certified MOA.
We went to get a drink, but he's got a surprise because the fountain's probably covered.
Vanessa, do you have anything to add to it? No.
Neither the Townsend Education Association or the classified union had any, I thought they were actually good edits, and they're very clarifying type
Yes.
edits to it, so.
The only question, I think the certified said, we have a couple questions that came in and talked to me and said, on the leave concerning the sick leave bank, and they said, well, why are we changing that shall to may? I said, because there's no guarantee sick leave bank, that has to go to a committee of 2 board members too, and so there's no.
And it's
guarantee.
dependent on contributions.
Yeah, and so it's a committee that makes that decision, so we don't want to put shall in there because that implies they will get a sick leave bank. I said, no, that makes sense. It was the only question they had. Signed it. Right there.
But if Mr. Chairman, I guess I would move then that we approve the certified MOA and the classified MOA as presented.
It's been moved and seconded to approve both the certified MOA and the classified MOA as presented. Any further discussion? Discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion passes. Personnel resignation.
You want to go get some waters or something? I have cold waters over in my office. Where do you want to proceed?
I'm fine.
I'm good.
I just didn't know how to proceed without Kevin.
I say we move on.
Okay. So resignations?
Yes, sir.
All right, so we do have 2 resignations from Abigail Wilkerson and Jana Buddy. I think I have them in the packet. I don't know if there are questions, but they both resigned positions. So I would ask that we approve those resignations.
I'll move to approve the resignations of Abigail Wilkerson and Janet. We're trying to catch it, but we kept going.
Seconded.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the resignations of Abigail Wilkerson and Jana Buddy. Any further discussion? Discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion passes. Employment, long-term substitute.
All right, would you like me to go through all of those and do them all at one time, or would you like to do them one at a time, sir?
I think all at once is great.
There'll be a couple changes to things in that as we go for notes, but I will keep this going. First of all, long-term substitute for 3rd grade, Magali Bellinger. Magali has worked for us much in the past. She is not currently certified, but she is working on her certification. I believe she has to do so much observation, and I believe it's towards her observation towards that. So, in the past, we have paid long-term substitutes at a rate of $75 per day instead of regular $72 per day. So I would move that we approve Magali Bellinger as long-term substitute at $75 a day. KitchenAid, we interviewed several applicants and recommend the hire of Danielle Douglas. Danielle actually has a lot of experience in a very positive way. Has worked in Belgrade kitchen for several years. And so certifications are needed. So I would ask that you approve the annual budget for 2020-2021 school year. Paraprofessionals, we interviewed 3 interested candidates for a paraprofessional position. At this time, 2 would replace our previous paraprofessionals who resigned. Third candidate was offered a temporary position to the end of December, pending board approval. Third position will be paid using the governor's money, the governor's COVID-19 funds. We'll look for other possible funding to continue that position if possible. So I'm recommending the board approve the hire of Brooke Ferguson and Gail Blair for the 2021 school year, and Suzanne Neal until December 31st, 2020. If funding is available after that time, then I will go for a separate contract, but I really don't want to offer a contract past that time until we see if they extend that funding. Each year we hire Pam Watson as a Medicaid administrator, so I would ask you to approve that this year. Summer program, Jesse Swenson and John Bacham work the summer program, provide golf instruction, and we need to officially hire them before we pay their stipends. So I ask that you hire them as summer children's program instructors. After school program, these are the ones that help us after school. The program, their services are appreciated. I'm going to ask that Laura Frazier actually, since you would do it, and then is unable to do that, so I'd like to remove her name from that list. We have Misty Mazzolo, Nicole Austin, Desiree Taves, Amy Lawson, Chris Gillespie, and Molly Hanson, but I'd like to add to that list Kayla Haxton. And then under that, I would actually like to add substitute. We've had 2 substitute applications since this came out. One is Miss Dana Riley, and the other one would be Jeremiah Johnson. So I'd ask that we approve them as substitutes for kitchen and custodian. Right now, what we're doing is using Dana and Jeremiah as soon as you approve them for hire. And I would ask that you do pending background checks on Jeremiah Johnson. He's the only one who don't have one. But what we're doing is using them as substitutes, so they're extras, and we are using the governor's COVID money to pay them. The way we're doing things in our kitchen right now, we need more hands, and so it's kind of labor intensive for the folks in there right now, so we're using them at least while we can.
Very good. Is there a motion on all those employment?
I'll move to approve the personnel employment list as presented and modified.
A second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the list of employment options and substitutions as discussed. Hopefully Pam got all that. Is there any further discussion? Discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion passes. Policy review, policy 3300, discipline.
All righty, Mr. Chairman, I guess.
Just turn this over to you.
Yes, I'm happy to, if you. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, so after our meeting in July, our draft suspension expulsion policy changes and were forwarded to the district's legal counsel for their input and review. Mostly just because there's been a pretty stark change in the way that the School Board Association has taken a lot of their larger policies where they ostensibly had a procedure-based policy, and then, if you will, kind of the implementation, kind of the policy end of it. And so the MTSBA in 2019 sent out to its members a kind of a homogenized version of that. In looking at the policy that they had, it's a very loose framework for policy. It didn't deal with a lot of the things that we might find desirable and to build into our process, to build into the goals that this board and hopefully future boards will carry forward and want to maintain. So having said that, like I said, Mr. Wilkerson, Sean, and I met on a couple different occasions. We had a work session. We also had our board meeting to discuss the thrust of what those policies intended to do. Due to school reopening, entanglements and things like that, our legal representation didn't get these documents to me until Friday late. I had a call with our legal counsel at 12:30 today. And while honestly, Mr. Chairman, members, I don't think we are probably in a spot to actually vote on it right now. I think there are probably a couple items that are kind of needed for some guidance or maybe at least some consensus on kind of an approach to take. And so what our legal counsel is prepared in out of the three handouts that we've got, the first one is what I would call our legal counsel's recommended course of action, which is a large rewrite of the MTSBA model policy. The second one is keeping as much of the MTSBA policy as possible, with some things that they would recommend be removed. And then the third document was their review of the revised draft conditional enrollment agreement. I guess the main concern that our legal counsel had with the model policy that MTSBA has, in some semblances, is similar to a concern that I have about policies, and that policies are supposed to be statements of what we intend to have happen. They shouldn't be encumbered as much by the kind of the procedures and the steps that actually need to occur in order to implement or execute the policy. A lot of what is in the MTSBA's model policy is repetitious in statute. So legal counsel is of the belief that those things that are in statute should stand without, I guess, unnecessary duplication in a policy. So that the strike through that you see, which is a good portion of the first 3 pages of the model policy, is a direct reflection on their review and recommendation that those items, again, like say, that are provided for either in statute or in IDEA, or would actually be removed. The recommendation from legal counsel starts, I guess, if you will, with their draft language on pages 3 and 4 of that attachment number 1, which is primarily again, what the board and the district would choose to have as far as an actual policy goes. That being said, our legal counsel has also advised us that, you know, the information that is in statute, the information that is in the MTSBA model policy isn't necessarily bad, for lack of a better term, but they would see those things that would be placed into like a procedures manual, an administrator's manual or guidebook, something like that, that would be able to, that an administrator, as they were following suspension protocols, would have as a reference to be able to know that this is the first step of the process, the second step, or, and however many that is taken. And so that is, like I say, what our legal counsel's recommendation is, and solely based on their experience and how they've rewritten these policies for school districts of our size and student population and those kinds of things. The second attachment, one that has number 2 placed in the upper left-hand corner, is keeping those, took the revisions that we all discussed, that we approved to move forward with legal content. And so there are fewer changes that are in there. And I guess I would characterize this as them saying that this would be, is more representative of what it is that we discussed back in July. But it is kind of a paradigm shift between having a policy that is detailed, that has numbers and explains things in a sense of step 1, step 2, this happens, that happens, and whatnot as we go along. And the third document was the draft conditional enrollment arrangement, which had very few changes, which I actually felt pretty good about, insofar as the boilerplate language of how a conditional enrollment agreement would work. Our legal counsel on the very last page of that third attachment, insofar as the conditional enrollment agreement discusses potential conditions for substance possession or abuse, our legal counsel has given us some advisement that if the district were to place a condition, for instance, for mandatory drug testing without notice, that we have a very detailed policy, that what it would be that would trigger that, the setting, the timing, during school hours, after school hours, have some specificity in there about how our drug testing process might be.
I think,
Utilizing the third party tester, that kind of thing.
right, I understand what you're saying on that, but part of their agreement when they come back to school is agreeing to mandatory testing, which would be under conditions set by the district. So why would we have to be specific about times and places and all those other things?
I think more the framework, because even though it's a condition for their continued enrollment, there's still Fourth Amendment issues with, it's considered a search even after unreasonable searches and
But if their
seizures. So
parents and them both agree to it,
you can't contract away a constitutional right.
okay.
So that, you can't contract to perform an illegal act, you can't contract away a constitutional right. And so,
Drug testing, how is drug testing an illegal act? If we're,
depending on how a drug test was carried out, it could be deemed to be an illegal search and seizure.
okay.
So,
like our policy for sports where any kids that
No,
participate in
no.
extracurriculars,
Yeah.
that's totally different.
so
Yeah.
it's not saying that it can't be done. It's our legal counsel's recommendation that we have some specifics about the framework and how that would happen. And
something
so
really
that,
simple.
that to me certainly is something that would be in development. After speaking with Bia, she says that she does have the ability to forward us some things to look at that have been implemented in other
Because that type
districts.
of testing takes place all over the place.
Certainly.
I mean, it's not unique to us. I mean, I guess it's unique because it's a minor. Is that what's making this unique?
No, I think, if somebody drug tests based on employment or based on participation in an extracurricular event or something like that, I don't know, because, I'm not an attorney, but there's been some distinction made that way. And while she said, yes, we can drug test students, more specificity about how that program should be discussed. And so that would be something that, as a condition, we would need to discuss with the student and their parents that this would be our idea of how this would work, and have some,
Yeah,
we'd be able to.
So that would be
those
really
things
kind of
hypothetically.
case by case basis, and depending on what resources we have available at that time. Because it might be different. I mean, we have these different clinics in town now. It might be much easier.
Yeah, and I think actually to your point, it probably would be. So while, as I kind of preface this with saying, I don't think that we're in a position to be able to vote on it this evening. I would like to, and our attorney said that she would be happy to, schedule a meeting. We could do a Zoom meeting with, a committee or something like that to have this out, but going with what our legal counsel's ideal situation, which in her estimation grants administration the greatest amount of latitude without trying to have our policy pitted against what statute says. That's always the difficulty with that, is that if you restate things, statute changes, case law changes, those things are always updated. Our policies don't have that kind of challenge and update as often as litigation related results. So having what is presented in item number 1 gets just to the heart of the policy. And then our legal counsel also said again as well that she would be willing to provide us with some examples of how the steps which are included in the MTSBA policy would be directed at administrators, like more as a guidebook or something that they would have in a manual that they'd be able to refer to as far as the implementation of policy number 3300 or policy number, whatever. But it is a pretty drastic departure from past practice where we've got procedures and goals and things that are kind of intermixed into policy. And sometimes that also ties the district hands and being able to apply a policy to a given situation. So, Mr. Chairman, I guess the question I would ask is that would the committee be amenable to seeing the additional information from our legal counsel and having that discussion? But I guess it would certainly help our legal counsel know if this board were more inclined to go towards modification of kind of the existing policy versus something that is a little bit more of a purist policy, and then it would have some sort of accompanying procedures.
I guess my question from either a technical or a procedural standpoint, we already approved this 2 months ago on first reading.
Correct.
Do we basically scrap that at this point and start over? Or how,
That would depend on the inclination of the board. If we were to approve the policy with our legal counsel's recommendations, which is document number 2, then no. I do not believe that we would need to withdraw consideration of the policy at this point in time. But I actually think if we were to proceed with one, that yes, we would actually need to kind of re-refer this back to the Student Services Committee with the input of legal counsel and with the additional information that our legal counsel is going to provide us.
Mrs. Hedlund, can I ask a question?
Yes.
I don't know, you probably haven't had a chance to go over this yet.
Just was kind of looking it over as we
Yeah.
were talking about it.
You know, I think, since you would be the main person who has to work with this, it has to be workable for you. When you've had a chance to look at it, are you part of the Student Services Committee? Like, if this is referred back to the committee, I mean, are you going to be reviewing it at that time or having input to it at that time?
I haven't been in on any
Yeah.
of this. yet,
Okay.
No.
so-
So
Well, none of us have.
Oh, okay, okay. I thought there was a
Superintendent
committee
Wilkerson.
that
yeah,
mattered.
so.
I was gonna
I'm
say,
not- I'm
I
not
wasn't
on
on
it.
that committee.
Okay.
So-
There's a committee where we discussed, you know, where we entered the initial referral to the Student Services Committee was to take the updated, the latest version of the MTSBA policy, to review that, to propose changes to the full board pending legal review. The red line version of those documents that are in our board packet was representative of those recommendations that were made at the committee level and that we discussed. Now that our legal counsel has raised additional issues, and is, you know, has provided us with 2 options.
Okay.
You know, at this point, like say, if you know, given the short order of their provision of this to us, you know, I think that it would be best for not even, you know, not just the board, but also for administration to be able to take a look at this and to have those discussions, and perhaps, you know, maybe we could compile some questions that say administrators would have that we could forward to our attorney if need be.
Okay.
So, but again, I wanted to bring this, what we have before us right now, just to say, get, one is a bit of a status update, but 2, to also let you know that there is, unfortunately, there are a couple different ways foreseeable for us to pursue the change in policy. And thankfully, the homework that I did, which was in document 3, didn't have a whole lot of changes. So I actually feel pretty good about the one that I had probably more chiefly drafted than any
Well, I'm
others.
looking at 1 and 2, just compare, obviously, quickly, and just recently. It just looks like, honestly, it's just a condensed version. It addresses the major points in 2. I'm talking about number 1. Number 1 addresses the major points. It's just condensed it down to a much more concise,
It is extremely concise,
policy. So that's what I see.
extremely
I think
concise,
it's good.
and
I mean, I don't, just glancing at it without having, but I haven't had a chance to really look at it. Sit
And-
with it either, so.
no, in
And then you were talking, when you're talking about number 2, you said it had more procedural type things in that. We don't have like an administrator's guidebook on this stuff. Our guidebook is the policies or any type of protocols and procedures that we want to put in need to be in the policy. As far, the way I understand it, unless there's something out there
I don't know of any
I don't know
document
about it, but
that's,
yeah, okay.
I don't know about one.
Uh,
We should-
Administrator's
I
guide
sure
to-
use
Right
one.
here.
Right there, right there. I could use one someday.
So given that,
What's the guidebook say?
you know, I mean, that might be something that we could actually look at the feasibility as a part of our long-range planning, whether something like that might be, say, an administrator's guide or.
I think our
you know,
policy
moving
acts
across.
as the guide,
Fine.
really, you know, does it need to be two separate things? What would be the,
I know that's what we go to when we're looking, you know,
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
I need to, when I run into the situation, I'm like, all right,
Right.
what's our policy say? What are we looking at? So,
I guess from a purist perspective, policies give you, this is the law, and this is the intention of the law. Procedures are what is the implementation of that.
okay,
And so to call it policy, but all it is step 1, step 2, step 3 procedures. It really, from a strict definition perspective, loses its significance as a policy, and it just becomes more a guidebook. But your point about, you know, the lack of having an administrator's, you know, compendium of how things get handled is, you know, a very good point. So, I guess, would there be any objection then for a motion to re-refer this back to committee to use, say, document number 2 as our kind of our resetting of our position and move forward perhaps with our legal counsel to make the document that we've seen is a little bit more visually, I guess, is a little bit more familiar with where we're at and what it is that we do in this district.
okay.
And then
Yeah,
we
I
can
would-
also have those discussions about those 2 items in the conditional enrollment agreement as well.
Okay,
Probably a first that something gets re-referred to committee after it's been discussed, but sure, I think that in the interest of, you know, full transparency and getting the amount of input that, you know, that we need for, I mean, this is kind of an important deal in our policies. So, I think that would probably actually work best.
I agree. I think it needs probably some input from the administration, you know, beyond what they
and
can,
our legal advice, yeah.
yeah, beyond what they can.
So, as far as, for our own board, this would be a motion to refer to the Student Services Committee on the current reading, for additional review and legal review. Is that
Yes,
correct?
yeah.
Okay. So moved. Yeah.
I'll second. Oh my goodness.
It's been moved and seconded to refer policy 3300 back to the Student Services Committee for further review and
Legal review.
legal review.
Certainly. Yes, sir, I think that all of that covers.
Okay. Any further discussion? Discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion passes. Policy 3125, education and homeless children. Education of homeless children, excuse me.
All right, so both our current policy and the MTSBA policy are included in the packet. Per the McKinney-Vento Homeless Education Act, school is responsible for the education of homeless students in our district. There are several differences in the 2 policies. Some are minor changes and others make it a little more specific. So what I did was highlighted the changes on each policy so you can kind of see the difference between the 2. For example, the MTSBA, or our policy says each child, MTSBA says every child. Ours says other students, changes it to children with permanent housing. Something more specific there. Adding MTSBA is, should a child become homeless over the course of the school year, the child must be able to remain at the school of origin or be eligible to attend another school in the district. Last paragraph from will to shall. And also the last paragraph change from thereafter, a written complaint must be filed in accordance with the district's uniform complaint procedure. 2, to further ensure that the district is removing barriers to the educational access and success of children and youth who are homeless, and to ensure that title and funding is expended in an appropriate manner, the district has adopted the dispute resolution form at 3125F, which will be the next one that we would approve if we do approve this one also. So I guess I do myself prefer the MTSBA policy. A little more to the point, and I do like that the using the form instead of using the uniform complaint procedure. It's more specific to homeless students. And I guess just to clarify, when they say the student of origin or the school of origin, that means if the family becomes homeless and they're living in a car in Helena, we're still the original school. We are still responsible for those services.
And this is required.
This is required by McGinn. Yes.
Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'd move that we approve MTSBA model policy 3125, R, education of homeless children, and the accompanying 3125F as presented.
It's been moved and seconded to approve MTSBA Model Policy 3125R and the accompanying Policy 3125F for first reading. Any further discussion? Discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes. Policy 3130, Students of Legal Age.
Okay, again, there are 2 differences between our policy and the MTSBA model policy. Our policy is actually a little looser with the benefits, I guess, we give to children that are 18 years that are so enrolled in our school. As the first paragraph, our policy adds, will be deemed to be an adult and will have legal capacity as such. They don't quite say that in MTSBA's policy, because MTSBA is leaning more towards, if a student's 18 years of age and still lives in their family's household and is claimed under their taxes, then they are still the dependent of that family, and the parents still have the say. So ours kind of leans away from that a little bit.
Which honestly helps us in many situations when they're telling you they can write their own notes and excuse themselves.
It helps us.
It helps if they're under the guardianship of their parents, even though they're 18. That helps us.
Yes.
Yes.
What, have we ever had a circumstance come up with an emancipated minor?
Not really, no.
Well, we've
So,
had
those things are on the rise. And
about 18 years
scary.
old, they don't need to be emancipated.
Right.
If they move out of their home and they have their own job and their parents don't claim them on taxes, then they're
They're no longer.
adults. So then legally, yes, they can sign all that stuff.
And we have
Parents
kids
have no
that
say.
are out on their own, that are
We-
not under the jurisdiction of their parents.
We had
We
one
have
last
that
year.
for those, yeah.
You know, and yeah, the existing policy that, there's a presumption, yeah, will be deemed an adult and have legal capacity to act as such. Yeah, that could be, yeah, that could be, I mean, yeah, that could be problematic. So.
That's just
just seems odd to me, like we said before, you can't contract away your rights. Well, your rights are, as an 18-year-old to be, it just seems weird that they can in this situation say, no, we're overruling that right of being 18 and I'm surprised that the legal, I don't care, I'm just saying, it's surprising that the official recommendation is that they do that, because that's really not what the law says, as an 18-year-old.
I don't know, at first blush, I guess I would look at it if the 18-year-old, through their own volition, lives with their parents, hasn't established their own household residency, hasn't, filed their own income taxes, chronologically, yeah, they are an adult, but, probably through, but for all of these other things that they've taken into account, they are a dependent, so, yeah, notwithstanding that threshold age, I just, the language in the existing policy appears to have been rethought since 2011 into what the current version is. The current version seems to be a little bit, takes a little bit of the ambiguity out of it, or at least tries to put things on a little bit firmer ground.
Well, the bottom line is that many seniors are 18 for almost their entire senior year of high school, like a lot of them.
Well, and we get parents that this day and age, will hold back their kid from entering into kindergarten. Unlike me, I was probably the youngest one in my kindergarten class and all the way through high school. But yeah, there are a lot of 18 and almost 19-year-olds by the time they graduate. So.
All right, the second item is forms. Our policy does not have anything about forms, but the SBA policy has that adult students who reside with parents or guardians and/or are classified as dependents of parents or guardians for tax purposes must have applicable forms slated by parents or guardians. They have to be field trip forms, anything that we make them sign off for responsibilities that the parents are still responsible for their children also. Field trips, athletic programs, our policy seems to allow signature of just the student as long as the district confirms the age of the student. And the SBA, however, still requires signature from parent or guardian. Basically follows the parent or guardian for tax purposes. Signing off that they can, I guess, participate in sports, and same thing with insurance and such. Suspension and expulsion, our policy adds adult students, however, are permitted to represent themselves if they so choose. If it's for an expulsion, they're saying the parents aren't necessary. Our policy is saying that. I think the SBA would say if they're still under their parents' taxes, then the parents still are responsible to come to that, or at least should be invited to that. Ours basically says if the child's 18, then we don't have to invite the parents to that, just the child. I'm sorry, I'm using the term incorrectly. It's an 18-year-old adult. It's not children.
Young adult.
Sorry. So again, I guess kind of up to you guys how you view that, but I kind of like the stricter of the two, where we still have something to fall back on, because a lot of kids think pretty quick when they are on their own and they're 18 years old. This way, at least legally, we can advise their parents of what's going on, if they're not living with them.
I'll move to approve the MTSBA policy 3130, students of legal age for first reading.
I'll second. It's been moved and seconded to approve MTSBA policy 3130, students of legal age for first reading. Any further discussion? Discussion, all those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, motion passes. Okay, Mr. Rob.
All right, I think Mr. Wilkerson pretty well summed up the beginning of the school year and everything, how smoothly things have gone. A few major changes we had, part of the kindergarten screening where we didn't do our traditional screening. We brought them in one at a time over the first 3 official school days, and then had the kindergarten start as a group on the 4th day of school, and that seemed to work really well. That group of kindergarten right now, and I think Mr. Wilkerson is going to review enrollment in his report, but it's small at this point, but we have quite a few, we have some remote learners, but we also have quite a few homeschoolers. So if, at this point, the homeschoolers have kind of indicated that they plan when this is all over and we move on to next year, bringing those students back. That group will be a pretty large group at that time. We're right now in the mid-40s. We'll be, I would anticipate, probably mid-50s or so by the time they go into 1st grade. So that's good. With our remote learning, we've had several students change already, and almost all of the changes have been students that had signed up for remote learning and wanted to attend in person after the first couple days. In fact, had several of them that decided before school ever started that they wanted to come. They ended up showing up on the first day. So that was good. The remote learning is going pretty well. We've got it rolling. There's a few challenges we've run into. Just some of them are kind of logistical things and administrative type things, how we want to handle it. But overall, we've had some pretty positive feedback on the program we're using, and parents seem to like it. They're able to get on. Accessibility has not been a problem for those students that have tried. And the feedback on the actual lessons and content has been pretty positive at this point. A lot of the daily routines that we do in school were kind of logistical challenges for us this year. They've really smoothed out a lot. And I really do. I thank the students, teachers, lunchroom people, janitors, everybody for being flexible, making it work. Lunch is still our most difficult time. And with that, we're having to, we have, our middle school misses a significant part of their 5th period class. The teachers are working with that the best they can, but it's the only way we can do it to make sure that we keep the lunchroom at the capacity it needs to be. So as we smoothed out that time that they're having to cut into that period after lunch, is starting to slowly kind of get dialed back a little bit. We're getting the routine down in the lunchroom and getting some additional personnel in there as well. Passing periods, the teachers have done a great job of implementing some classroom protocols for when students leave the classroom or when students leave to go to recess. They're all doing it a little bit differently, but they have some dismissal procedures that help eliminate crowding in the hallway. We're able to keep the distancing and the traffic flow the way we want it. And in the middle school, we're just really working with those passing periods to kind of release one grade level at a time and kind of let them get where they're going and then proceed with the next one. So it's worked well. You know, we've done a pretty good job of eliminating large crowds at any one spot, like as they enter and exit the building, by bringing them in different doors. All of those things have worked pretty smoothly. You know, we're still waiting, and hopefully we're waiting a while, but I know it's going to be coming. Is that first positive case in our school and the protocol for how we handle it. And you know, there's just been a lot of things in the news and a lot of discussion about the information information is given out, how much do you give, how much can you legally give, and making sure that people are able to know if they've been exposed or reasonably make, take the precautions that they need to. So, we know it's gonna come, it's a matter of when, probably. But so far, to my knowledge, that we've been notified, there've been no positive cases in schools. Are you guys doing any temperature checks at school? We talked about that a little bit.
What we're doing is if students are presenting symptoms, then we are doing temperature checks, and we've had several. The strange thing is we've had a really high number of students ill and leaving, and staff that have actually been tested and all been negative. And it's just, seems kind of early in the year for that. I attribute possibly a little bit of it, maybe I'm just guessing that everybody's been apart for so long, and now they're all back together and kind of, it's like exposed to things that normally wouldn't faze them a lot. But, so we've had to do several temperature checks, send some students home that weren't feeling good. And as we've said, the difficult part of this is that, the symptoms present themselves. As one doctor told me, the problem is, all the sinus stuff, all the cold stuff, the allergy stuff are all symptoms. He said everything's a symptom and nothing's a symptom. So it just is a real challenge. And this time we've noticed, this last week, since the fires, really, the air quality has really gone downhill. We're getting just a lot of people that don't feel good. The scratchy throat, it's the sinus stuff, the difficulty breathing, the asthma is really flaring up. So hopefully maybe some of this recent weather here in the last 48 hours has dampened some of those, and we'll see some improvement and not be battling a little bit of that. Because we're definitely erring on the side of caution, and parents have been really good about not sending kids if they're not feeling well. They kind of call them, just, I want to keep them home, I'm not sure. And so we appreciate that. So far, so good. Everybody's kind of working together to make it work. Parents have been a big part of that.
Thank you.
All right. Ditto on a lot of that. Makes it easy by the time it gets to me. Just really pleased with the high school staff, the high school students. They have honestly just been awesome. Few to tiny, minor little problems, but for the most part, they are doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing and just not even fighting the process. Like I said earlier, I think they're happy to be back, and they just don't want to go back to remote learning. For the most part, I think that was really hard for most high school students to be away from their peers and all their stuff and their activities and their classes. So I think they're just like, whatever we have to do to be here, we're happy to do that for the most part. School's been great. Probably the biggest challenge has been all the extracurricular stuff. And honestly, that's been the toughest part, is trying to get all that to go seamlessly with coming back to school and everything else. The programs are all off and running, and everybody's doing well, so that's good. I think we've got good numbers. Everybody's participating. This is kind of where the spectator policy falls in. We had come up with our original spectator policy and how we were going to address it. And honestly, it ended up kind of being the model policy by proxy for a lot of other schools that had no spectators. And so they presented some form of ours in a modified version. Mr. Wilkerson can tell you that too, to try to get some kind of spectators at their events. We got to have a couple of run-throughs. First football game, great with our spectators, really rough with the visiting spectators. Second football game, pretty good with our crowd. I think, everybody is going to wear on people as it goes, but they were actually very respectful, and most of them were pretty compliant. The visiting crowd, much better. We didn't have near the problems that we had the first time around. Actually, they were pretty darn good, so that wasn't bad at all. Volleyball was the one we're worried the most about with room and being able to fit people in. And we actually even kind of threw out there that maybe we would modify it and not have any visiting fans for volleyball for space room. And actually, it's gone really well. Mr. Wilkerson, Mr. Rao, everybody else has gone and we've marked out sections. The visiting parents have assigned seats for volleyball, and it's actually worked out really good. We did make some modifications and allow family groups to sit together at the last time. We were separating them before, and then we thought, you know what, they are together all the time anyways. So we grouped them together. That seemed to go a lot more smoothly. Our visitors for volleyball have been great. We've had zero issues, problems. They're doing what they're supposed to do. They're showing up, they're staying where they're supposed to stay. And we have plenty of room. I was really worried about room once we got a full-on student body, or a large group of students coming to spectate volleyball. And actually, they've been great. They're all wearing their masks. People are being very compliant for what it's worth for the most part. So I'm pleasantly surprised that that's been going so smoothly. So I feel like we are doing well. We'll just keep rolling with what seems to be working. And now it seems like a lot more school districts have worked with their health boards to open up spectators a little bit. As you guys are seeing in the news, there's a lot more opening up for that. So I think we did all right from the get-go, and it seems to be holding up okay. You know, that being said, we may have to modify it. Basketball is going to be a whole nother nightmare. I don't even know where we're going to go for basketball, but right now it seems to be pretty manageable for what we're dealing with right now. We did get all of the equipment for the National Federation for the NFHS to do the broadcasting, the live streaming of our events. Have our account also. This has been something else. I tell you what, it's been kicking my rear for days, but we finally got that all set up. Now it's just a matter of getting the equipment up. And I know Joe and Mr. Riddle are all over that. They spent most of today looking at everything and getting it configured. So we're very hopeful that we will have the inside unit up, maybe by Thursday, but maybe by Saturday. So it takes a lot of, it's going to take quite a bit of setup. Joe can probably speak to that too, but for the most part, we're excited. I think we need to clear up some things. I think, my understanding is that when people, they do have to subscribe to watch. So it is going to cost people to do so, but we get kickbacks for that. So some of that comes back to our school.
It's $10.99.
Yeah.
It used to be it's gone up $1 since last year.
Yeah,
So
yeah, and that's
That's pretty
is that per month or is that?
it's per month. You can
Okay, that's
get
what
an
I thought.
annual subscription for $120.
So if you go to nfhs.org, I think it is, or net or whatever, you'll see it, type in Broadwater Bulldogs, our whole page pops up. I'm starting to put in some schedule things at the hopes that we're gonna actually be able to live.
And you can
stream them.
sync
Yeah.
your calendar
Yeah.
through that. So yeah, I've done
So,
that.
yeah, I think
it
it's-
works well.
I think it's gonna be great. Unfortunately, we're at the mercy, still for visiting spectators on our end, we're at the mercy of, like volleyball, Gardner, no visiting spectators. So nobody could go in, we can't live stream. This equipment's pretty specific in that Trinity Vandenberg was lovely. We worked for days trying to get the last volleyball and football thing going, but he did not have the compatibility with his equipment. You have to have very special, like, capture cards. Am I saying that correct? Yes.
For his equipment, yes.
Yes, and we just didn't have it, and we just could not get it together, but I really appreciate him reaching out saying, if I can figure out a way to do it, I'll help you out and do it, so. We got part of it done, we just could never get the equipment to match it, so hopefully it'll all come together and we'll be able to at least provide some, alternate ways that people can enjoy our home activities, if nothing else, so. And I think a lot of our, district and conference folks have that set up, so they're gonna be able, once they go in, they're gonna be able to watch wherever we are, if they are running the live stream events on NFHS, so we're hopeful for that. I'm waiting to hear word about this weekend for football. They have a board meeting tonight too, so we'll see what they decide to do with their spectator policies, so that's where we are. It changes daily, hourly sometimes, and we just try to push that information out as fast as we can. With what we learn on that. Remote learning, about the same. We have about 15 students in the high school. We had several come face-to-face after the first couple of days. They decided they wanted to come back. We did have 2 that went the other way and went to remote learning within the first couple of days for different reasons, mostly medical or work situations for parents worried about their kids getting exposed and then taking it to their work. So other than that, it's gone well. The teachers jumped right on board. They all did their training. They've been checking in on students, and actually I just had an IEP before this, and that student is actually learning at home, and that was one of our biggest concerns, because we know some of those students really struggle in the spring with anything distance, and actually they are doing quite well with it, and it's rolling out nicely for them. So that was kind of a relief to hear that somebody, that they're navigating it quite well with the help of teachers and everything else. So that was positive. Upcoming activities, we have quite a few things rolling out. We've got Picture Day coming up Thursday. The Honor Society induction is actually moved to the 28th. I had the 15th in there as a question mark because we were still trying to schedule that. So we are going to move to the 28th, and they're proposing to have it at Heritage Park. So an outdoor venue down at the park, and weather permitting. We have a backup plan of possibly using the multi-purpose room if the weather's bad that day. Something a little different. I'm just really impressed with the high school staff and the students about their ability to think outside the box when we have to, and change up some of these things that have just always been done the same way. And they're actually embracing it quite well. So, all in all, that's a good lesson for kids for flexibility, and that sometimes we have to accept change and roll with it. Kind of on the same thread, we have homecoming week, the 21st through the 25th. I actually met with the advisor and the student council last week, and we started hashing out some ideas, what we're probably gonna be able to keep, what's gonna have to go, how we can, what can we bring to the table, something different. They met again on Friday to finalize some of those things, and I think we have a really great homecoming week plan coming together. We will have to give up a few things, but they've come up with some great ideas. For example, the dance on Saturday, that's not happening. But they came up with an alternate, let's have a outdoor movie night, and we'll all come down, they can all come down to the field and just have a movie night with their peers and be socially, spread out and be outside. And so we're looking at things like alternative things like that. The kids have been great about coming up with some alternative ideas, so. We'll roll that out as soon as we finalize a lot of that too. Parent-teacher conferences are the 29th. And then the last event before we meet again is our Rusty Riseland Invitational, the big cross-country meet we host here. We actually had to divide it into 2 days. So the junior high will run at 4 o'clock on the 9th, and the high school will run at 10 o'clock on the 10th. And that way because we can only have so many numbers at a cross-country event. And we're still working out what spectators might look like for that. That's a whole nother, it's a totally different event. So pretty much the visiting spectators, I don't know with our venue, people can actually be on the outside of the course. We're not gonna be able to allow people to flood the course like we do and travel from point to point. It's just not gonna work. So we won't be able to control it enough. So we're gonna come up with some alternate ways we can do that. And then I forgot, we actually have been working on another home meet called the Townsend Invitational for cross country. Poor cross country got hit hard. And what happened was, because of the numbers limitation, you can have so many runners, we basically, all of Class B, Class C, basically got kicked out of all of the big, like Belgrade, Bozeman, because they can't have the numbers. So they're hosting for the AAAs, and we have had to kind of revamp our schedule. And we were down to like literally 3 cross-country meets, and that was it. So the good news is, everybody ante's up. We have some extra ones scheduled at West Yellowstone. We're gonna host another one. We're working on it right now, but it's gonna actually be up on the National Guard training area, and we're working on the final plans for that. So yeah, they're gonna, well, hopefully they're not dodging anything any live ammo or anything like that. So our team runs that a lot, with permission. So they're actually working with the National Guard to have a meet up there and see what that looks like, another different thing. So
When is that?
that's the 19th. The 19th. We're just now finalizing that. I've had a lot of back and forth on that, looking at what we're approved to do, where they're talking about, that's also interesting for spectators too, because that's a whole nother level of military security. I don't know what that's gonna look like, but we'll see what they come up with. And what
My
they
son found a UXL, unexploded ordnance, when he was working for the the weed mapping. crew.
Yes. Oh, very nice. I did not need to know that, Kevin. Thank you for sharing that with me.
They used to come give a presentation to us about what, teaching kids what to do if they encounter one.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So there's a bunch of them.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully the course is going to. That's all I have to say. So again, it just all kind of goes back to,
You don't want to
know?
be first.
I know,
Yeah.
no, you don't. It kind of goes all back to them, to everybody just thinking outside of the box, because that's really where we are, and that's a good exercise for us in life in general. So I'm really happy with how things are going, and it's a little chaotic, not gonna lie, but we're handling it, and it's going all right.
How are you expecting parent-teacher conferences to look?
That's another, yeah, I don't think we've got.
You haven't got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
No,
That's
but that's
a ways
another,
away.
honestly, that's another really good question. I don't know if we, in the high school, we don't do appointments or schedules. I know the grade school usually does, right?
No,
No, okay.
but I think what we'll do is probably go to, assuming we're, in this same situation we're in, then we'll do, like a Zoom meeting or something and have, appointments and work through everybody.
Let's try and get
We're gonna do them one way or another, canceling them completely again is not an option, so.
to be continued.
Yep. You're,
Sorry, I had to write a note. Okay, we've already covered reopening the schools, committees, I think we're already set on that. So I'm assuming the committee meeting to go over 3,300 would be the same two board members and myself and the recommendations, Severin.
That would be my desire, yes.
She's gonna deal with it probably more than any other.
Yes,
So does that sound appropriate?
absolutely, yeah, I'd say whichever, have them draw straws, whoever gets a short straw shows up at the committee meeting or something. So, but yeah, that kind of input is really valuable, so.
Well, even Brad at the junior high level, I mean, we've encountered sort of things from junior high kids too, so. I don't know.
I'll get in touch with everybody and see when that works. Okay.
Thank you.
Vocational education, so we are meeting on the 10th. We have an advisory group of local business people, in agriculture, technology, like family consumer sciences, and getting them together. The new Perkins 5 grant is absolutely insane amount of work. But I'm learning a lot as I go, so that'll be an advisory group that gets together to help us create the comprehensive local needs assessment, which we have to do, which is about a 20-page report of different things that we need to work on or things that we're doing well. And so I'm currently working on that. Current school numbers, right now, grades 1 through 8, we have 45 newly enrolled students, as in you weren't in our district before, now they live in our district, which is amazing. Just a few numbers though, kindergarten, we have 43 new kindergarten students, but we graduated 43 seniors, so that was kind of a wash from last year. 21 students have moved out of district, 33 students are homeschooled, and I believe that's who were enrolled last year and now are homeschooled. That's not total. So I say we're down approximately 10 students, but the next number, it's a little more than that. Last year's enrollment at this time, or at least when we did the count in October, was 642. We did a count last week and it's at 628.
Mr. Wilkerson, I think since you compiled these numbers, I think we have 5 or 6 new K-8 students since then. So in addition to those 45.
We're seeing
Got
a
a
lot
couple of
going
high
into the
school, too.
district for some reason. I'm not sure if they're out of state or just moving into our district. We'll probably have to try to figure some of that out. We covered the first 3 weeks of school, and one thing I don't have on here is MCEL. MCEL is October 15th and 16th of this month. I did add a sheet here. It's all virtual this year. And it's
So you have to
exploring
stand
the
all the way.
future of
We
public
can stand up all
education.
day. We can wear pajamas, Kevin.
It's on exploring the future of public education in a changing world. So I guess if you're interested, I know Sean was, I believe the cost is still like $250 per person. So if you are interested in that, basically I register you and they send you the passwords to get into it. And do it on your own time. So just let me know, and I'd like to do them all at one time. It's a little easier.
Is there a date you need to know?
Let me. Not that I saw, and then the only reason it really came to my attention was Sean said, hey, can you register me? Whoops, himself. We've had so many other things go on, I haven't even noticed it, so. I will look at that and see if there's a deadline to that. And that's all I have.
I guess I'd like to add one quick thought. I've had a couple discussions with teachers from other school districts in the last week, and they've expressed that things are not going well in their districts. And a lot of it came down to communication between the administration and the board. So I would just like to add another thank you for everything that we've done. And it looks like, you know, we've gotten off to a really good start. And I know some districts are not feeling that way. So I appreciate and I guess want to extend gratitude again for everything that we have been able to do and for where it appears that our teachers and our students, you know, I stopped by quickly the opening morning of school and have been by a couple other times dropping my own kids off, and, you know, it looks like things are going well. And you know, the kids looked ready to be back to school, teachers looked ready to be back to school, and I thought everybody looked very positive. And so I appreciate that we've been able to do that and be where we are today. Meeting adjourned.